Aloha! Welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa. Thank you for joining me today. In this episode, I'm going to talk about chromaticism. Chromaticism, how to play wrong notes or what wrong notes lend to music. So often we think of wrong notes as being bad. I want to talk about how wrong notes are good in a lot of situations, and you just need to learn how to massage them. And I'll play some examples and hopefully help you kind of come to terms and grasp that's happening with chromatic notes. In this episode, I want to talk about chromaticism, which is wrong notes. Basically, all the notes in between the scale that you're playing in. And so often we think of these wrong notes as bad, as wrong, when in fact it's just flavors and different colors, and I want to show you a couple different ways to think about it and play some examples for you, show you how you can use wrong notes to get even more mileage out of what you're playing and kind of how to create more interest in your music and make it better instead of thinking of it as worse. The podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice so you don't miss any episodes. It's a free way of supporting what I do, keeping up to date, getting yourself some awesome ukulele tips, and it helps with the visibility of the podcast and all of that good stuff. If you haven't heard, I just released my new ukulele course called Left Hand Technique for Ukulele. I've been hearing from students who are starting to work their way through the content, and they're all finding it very valuable, and I'm so glad to finally have gotten this content out into the world for public consumption. The course is all about how to optimize your fretting technique, how to begin to understand and go beyond understanding to really have a good grasp and mastery of the fretboard, how to navigate it, how to move between notes and know where you are and know where you need to go without any kind of voodoo memorization kinds of things. So if you're looking for a sequential set of lessons that can help you kind of get to the next level, I would encourage you to please go check it out, liveukulele.com. If you click on the store button in the menu, you will see it right away. It's full of 50 video lessons from beginner to advanced. There should be something for everybody there, and I hope I will see you in the lessons. So when we talk about chromaticism, we're talking about all of the notes. Chromatic is from the Greek chroma, which means color. It's the colorful scale. It's all of the notes in Western music. If you were to play on one string of your ukulele and play every single fret, that is the chromatic scale. It's super simple and nobody thinks about it. They all get hung up on playing major scales or minor scales or pentatonic scales or learning the right notes for the key that you're playing in and completely neglect everything else. But there's so much extra color that you can get from those 5 wrong notes in a given situation. In most keys, you're going to be working with 7 notes that are inherent to the key that you're playing in. So your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And left over are the 5 notes that are not included in that scale. And those 5 leftover notes, interesting tidbit, is a major pentatonic scale or a minor pentatonic scale. If you take all of kind of the inverse scale of any major or minor scale is actually a pentatonic scale. So if I play an F major scale, for instance, that is 7 unique note names, and that creates a major scale. But if I was to play the inverse of that, all of the notes that I intentionally didn't play because they are wrong notes in the key of F, I would end up actually with, if my figuring is correct, I would actually be playing a B major pentatonic scale. Those are the notes that I didn't play in the first scale. So the inverse of it, kind of the black keys version of the white keys on the piano, is a major pentatonic. Interesting side note. But as you're playing, if you're playing in a major key, you have those 5 wrong notes that don't get very much attention. And that's a real shame, because those 5 wrong notes are really what make a lot of the music that you love. It's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it groove. That's what gives it its character, is some variation of adding in those wrong notes in addition to the right notes. Certainly there are styles where it stays really within the lines of what's in the scale, like, real mainstream kind of pop stuff. Usually it's very straight ahead and they don't stray from the path of whatever is in the major scale. But for all the other genres, including Hawaiian music, where I kind of have my practical application of this style, or that's where I get it from, that's how I understand it, the lens that I'm looking through, that's half of what we play is wrong notes. And so often people get stuck on playing the right notes that they forget there are even options outside of the scale. All right? And so I think the best way to explore this chromatic aspect is to think about where there are good places to connect notes using whatever's between them. Right? So if you have a major scale that you're playing, I'll go back to the F just because we're there. There are a couple places there where it makes sense sonically, more so, to walk the notes chromatically together, right? If I'm playing, I have F, and then I have G. That's a whole step apart. And for a lot of situations, the chromatic note between them, which is F sharp, that's probably the most sour, probably the least used chromatic note as far as creating a different flavor. Just because having the root note and then its half step away neighbor played back to back and in the same kind of riff at the same time, that can be a little bit clunky sounding. But if we go from G to the next note, which is A, if we connect the G and the A together with the note that's between them, G to A is a whole step, so we're skipping a fret. If we actually play the fret between and we go G, G sharp, A, inside the context of the scale, that walk is going to sound a little bit more musical, a little bit more familiar and sonically useful. So if I start from F and just play my way up the scale to that point, even if you go up and down, it already kind of sounds sort of groovy. There's like an interest to it because we're playing that wrong note. And our ear goes right, right, wrong, right. And by having the tension that the wrong note puts into that spot of the music, when we go back to a right note, it's even more of a relief, kind of, when we get to that home note that is already inside the scale. So you can think of it as tension and release, tension and release. When you go to a wrong note or an inverse note, the thing that your ear is feeling is tension because it's not exactly what you expected. It's a little bit off. It's a little bit different. You know, it's like, I don't know, somebody putting an ice cube on the back of your neck. It's like, woo, that's not, you know, it's not like somebody just stabbed me with a knife, but it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's a little bit not what I was expecting. It's a little bit different. And then when you go back to a normal note, all of that tension is resolved. And so if you just take the F scale and you just play F, G, G sharp, A, up and down, you're going to get a little bit of a vibe. And that already is a lot more interesting than just playing up and down. That's very flat, very plain. It doesn't sound bad, but there's not a lot of interest to it when you're just playing a straight scale like that. But even just playing a straight scale and using the chromatic note, when I play the wrong note, it kind of feels right in that moment. It's not necessarily wrong, it's just interest. And so that is a good place to begin adding chromatic notes, is in a scale context, connecting notes that are a whole step apart in certain places in the scale. So let's look at it from a numbers standpoint. This can help you figure it out in other scales to know which notes you might connect. If we play up the F scale and we give a number to each note, I'm going to be playing F as 1, G 2, A 3, B flat 4, C 5, D 6, E is 7, and then back to F is the 1 again. Some people call it 8 if you're going to continue up, but usually just the 1. So we have 7 notes, 7 unique note names, and then we play F again at the end. So using those numbers, we can figure out where we're playing the chromatic notes between. So when I was playing the G, G sharp, A, the G is the 2 note, and the A is the 3 note. So if you know that you can chromatic walk between the 2 and the 3, you can apply that to any key. You just have to count up through the scale and figure out where the 2 and the 3 are. All right, so 2 to 3. If I continue up the scale, my next note is the 4, which only moves a half step up. But if I go from the 4 note, which is the B flat, up to the C note, which is the 5, again, that's a good place to walk. I'm going to get the B flat, B, and C. Basically, I'm playing from G to C, all chromatic, because I have F, and then G, and then G sharp is our inverse wrong note, and then A, and then B flat, which is naturally part of the F scale, and then B is a wrong note to C. And I'm swinging it, I'm not playing it necessarily straight, but just to give you an idea of what is happening. And usually when you're playing chromatically, you're not going to always play everything in order, because if you do that and you connect every single note, you're going to be basically playing a chromatic scale minus maybe like the F sharp, because that's one that's usually less desirable. So what you usually will do is you'll just take one half step inside the scale and choose to play it chromatically. And as you go by, you'll just walk the notes instead of playing a whole step. You'll play half step, half step. And so you're not going to be playing everything chromatically all in order, because as you play a melody or a lead, you're going to be playing jumps. You're going to be moving around inside of the song. And so what you can do with the chromatic style is just anytime you play a whole step from one note to the next, you can chromatically connect that by just adding the middle note. But you're not necessarily always playing everything in order unless you're playing Joy to the World, da, 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 da. That's a descending major scale, but that's the only contemporary example of a major scale all in order that I have ever really heard. So what that means is if I'm playing, well, let's continue on before we start getting into how to apply it. Let's continue on. We have B flat, B, C as our number 4 note to our number 5 note, connecting it with the B in the middle. And then if we continue up, the 5 to the 6 is another whole step movement where we can connect notes. And so right there, I'm just playing the scale and only walking from the 5 to the 6 note. Once again, if you were to go from the 6 note to the 7 note, you can walk that one as well. And that's your blues note. That's going to be your flat 7 that is included in a 7th chord. So if I have F, my ukulele is out of tune, I'll tune it in a sec. But if you have F, and then F7, that E flat note is what you get when you walk from the 6 to the 7. And so if you put it all together, so let's take a tour of the F major scale and look at all of the different places that we can walk a half step distance to get that chromatic flavor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play up and down the major scale, and each time I'm going to move where I'm walking. I'm not going to play it all chromatically because, like I said, if I put all of the walks back to back to back, I'm basically playing a chromatic scale. I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to see where the walks can be implemented in a given situation. So I'm going to start with the first one, which, if you recall, was the 2 to the 3 note walk, which would be G, G sharp, A, and play that inside the major scale. And then I'm going to move between the different whole steps that I'm going to walk. And then my next one was B flat to C, the 4 to the 5. And if I put that in the scale, and then if I go from the 5 note to the 6 note, I'm playing C, C sharp to D. And then the last one would be from the 6 note to the 7 note, from D, D sharp to E. So those 4 walks, 5 if you ever wanted to go from the root note, the 1, to the 2 and walk that, F, F sharp, G. You can, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very different flavor though than the others. The others are kind of like complementary, I'll say, and the that's the most out one. If I was to rate them by the wrongness of their sound, I would rate that one first. So, with our 4 less offensive walks, shall we say, you have 4 places where you can create movement in your melody. If you are playing back and forth between notes, between those whole steps, you can play chromatically and play middle notes to move things along a little bit differently. For example, I'm going to take Angeline Baker or Angeline the Baker, depending on where you're at. It's a traditional kind of bluegrass song, fiddle music kind of song. It's a very simple melody. In my notation I've got here, this is a song out of the Left Hand Technique course. It's a very simple melody. It just kind of goes like... You've probably heard it before, but it's pretty straightforward. However, I'm playing in the key of C here. And so if I kind of transpose everything that I was playing before, my walks, basically I'm just knowing that I want to avoid walking from, in this case, the C to the D, right? Because that's my 1 to my 2. That's the awkward walk. I'm not necessarily going to want to play that. But everything else is kind of fair game as far as walking between the whole steps. So as I play the song, I have those first 2 notes. That's a whole step. and then it goes again, so another whole step. So if I wanted to walk that, I could go. Or I could walk the last bit too. Now that's kind of exaggerated, that's sort of a lot, but it gives you an idea of how you could add the middle note, and you'll notice that I'm adjusting the melody and the rhythm of the melody to actually add a note to the phrasing. And that's something you got to keep in mind if you want to play chromatically. If you want to get a little bit of that sass and sour from the inverse wrong note, you're going to have to account for it rhythmically and within the phrasing. And so while that might be kind of extreme, if I was going to give it a shot and try and play it maybe the most musically, the most appropriately, I might do like half of what I did before to get that little bit of wiggle sour going on in there. If I continue on in the song, that next little bit, it's going to be kind of following the scale up. I have another whole step from the C to the D, but that's kind of our awkward walk. And then we have D to E, which is a more interesting walk. So let me see if I can throw that in there for that part of the song. Just creates a little bit of a wiggle. It's not quite as straight, not quite as plain, but as you're going through it and you're improvising, you can play that note. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little bit of flavor. One of the people that I gained the most from, probably philosophy-wise, when I was a youngster just getting started in music, is my friend Kona Bob Stouffer. He's on the podcast. If you look way back, he was in, I think, the first season. Fantastic interview. We had a really great time. I encourage you to go listen to it if you have the time. But he always said that you're only ever one fret away from a right note, which means if you play a wrong note, all you need to do is shift up or down to get to a right note. And I'm sure he's not the first guy who said this. I'm sure he picked it up from somebody else, but he was the first guy that I heard say this. And it was kind of an epiphany. It was like, wow, that makes so much sense. Because if you're playing a major scale is only made up of half steps, which is 1 fret, or whole steps, which is 2 frets up. So if you happen to land in the middle of a whole step and you're on a wrong note, one of the 5 inverse notes, to go back to a right note, all you have to do is either go up 1 fret or down 1 fret. So if you're soloing along and you land on a note that you know is not part of the scale, if you just massage it up a fret or down a fret, it's going to sound slick. That is something that I think is often overlooked, is people play a wrong note and they instantly tag it as a mistake. Oh no, I made a mistake, right? Which is obviously, it's easy to think that in the moment, but in the long run, if you can just massage it into a right note, it's actually going to be more interesting and more hip than whatever you would have played on your own, by yourself, without the mistake, right? If you played it perfectly the first time, it would have registered as not a mistake. Okay, I played it right. But it would have been less interesting, which is why it took me a long time to figure this out. But as you are improvising in different styles of music, jazz, bluegrass, Hawaiian, blues, of course, whatever it might be, playing those wrong notes is where the secret sauce is. You've got to play those wrong notes to get the sound. If you're always playing super safe, super inside the scale, it's just not going to come across as naturally as something that's played with some of those wrong notes to get the sway, to get the swing, to get the little bit of vibe that comes from that tension and release. So if I was to riff on Angelina Baker a little bit more to just give you some ideas of what is possible. Remember, as I'm playing through the scale, I'm looking for places where there are whole steps. And where there are whole steps, I know that I can connect those whole steps chromatically. Not grammatically, chromatically. Right? It all sounds hip when you play it confidently. It's when you think it's a mistake and you shy away from it like a horse that there becomes problems. That's when it becomes obvious that it's a mistake, and it's obvious that you didn't take advantage of what was provided to you within the mistake. So, Angelina Baker, if I just kind of riff around with it and see what I can come up with, I'm going to kind of solo around the idea of the song. See if you can hear where I'm playing chromatic walks between whole steps. Instead of just playing note, note, the whole step apart, I'm going to try and milk that chromatic sound a little bit more. Not the cleanest example, but it should give you some ideas, is that a lot of what I'm playing is within the scale, and I am making the jumps. I'm playing the whole steps and the half steps that are inherent to the scale. But in places where I want a little bit of a sway, a little bit of a flavor, I'm playing the chromatic walk. And so there's no science to this. There's no rules. There's nothing that your sheet is ever going to tell you, if you look at it hard enough, that revolves around this. This is part of music that is not free. You have to reach out and take it yourself. You have to practice it. You have to explore it on your own. It's not something that somebody is going to show you how to play at your ukulele club, because it's almost never written down. It's just an expression thing. That's all it is. It's just a way of expressing the music, a way of creating flavor in the music. There are, of course, songs that are kind of written around this, where there's riffs, like if you were to play Wipeout. Wipeout has right? That's your chromatic wrong note there in the riff. It's written there, so you might learn that. But as far as improvising or changing, altering melodies, that kind of a thing, you're really going to be kind of on your own. But that's not a bad thing. All you need to look for is where there's a whole step, just add a note in the middle. Change the phrasing, go a little faster so you can add the note, or bend and stretch the whole thing. A lot of times the best solos are interpretations of the melody where you kind of use it as a bass line, but then you sort of go off in the weeds and kind of find your own way through the path between the notes. And if you feel like you need a little bit of a solid or a more solid place to stand, a solid place to have some inspiration, you can go back to just playing the normal melody. But when you want to cut loose a little bit more, then you can go and play your wrong notes and stretch the phrasing and move the timing around to fit what you want to express. So I would like to encourage you all to listen to one of the best ukulele songs of all time, in my opinion, but also one of the most blatant, repetitive uses of a wrong note on the ukulele. And that is Island Love by the Peter Moon Band. Look it up. It should be on YouTube. If it's not on YouTube, you should buy the album because it's amazing. It's just a stunning piece of work. And throughout the whole entire song, Peter Moon on his ukulele, he plays. And so you're getting that wrong note throughout the whole song. It's always there. It's kind of part of the rhythmic part. And that tension and release just in that one ukulele part, there's big guitars and bass guitar and, strumming ukulele and stuff. But that 1 3-note little line played with a little bit of a sass to it, it just creates, that makes the song. You can play the song without it, but that makes the recording great. Is that little riff that I'm sure he just pulled out of thin air, and by having the movement, it makes the song that much greater. So I would encourage you to go listen to it. Island Love, Peter Moon Band. It's fantastic. Just absolutely a work of art. And one of my big inspirations for playing ukulele is to be able to play in the pocket like that, to play just a few notes and say so much with it and express so much with it and make such a difference in the song with that little part. So, to kind of recap, you have 7 notes normally in a major scale, and you have 5 inverse notes that are not played in that major scale that are usually thought of as wrong notes. They're not wrong, they're just color. And you need to just change your attitude and change your mindset to recognize them as such so that when you play them, intentionally or accidentally, you know that you can always massage them up a fret or down a fret and you'll be on a right note. And so to take that further, when you go to play these notes intentionally, you can always find places to add them to melodies anytime you play a whole step between notes. So if you're in the key of C and you need to play from D to E, you can walk that. Instead of just playing, creates that interest because you're rising up through the notes. It's the same kind of thing that happens with a slide. It's just a slide makes it go faster. So whereas a hammer-on will take you directly to the note, the slide gives you an instantaneous window into the middle note. Right? If you slow it way down, you're just transitioning frets slowly. So from that sense, you could think of a slide being a little bit more snazzy. But anytime you have that whole step distance, 1 fret in between that's not usually played, you can play that fret, and that can be your chromatic note. It doesn't have to be complicated. So often things are majorly overthought and overstudied, and people write it out and think about it. But if you know a scale, which if you don't know a scale, you can go look one up and apply this right off the bat. Anywhere there is a place where you're moving 2 frets higher, just play the next note, play the middle note between the two, and you can play a chromatic walk. And that's the simplest way to get in the door, the simplest way to get started. And once you're a little bit more confident with using the inverse color notes, it's going to be obvious where you can start to use that sound in other places. You can start to, instead of even playing all the way through the walk, you don't even need to complete the walk. You can use that color note as your pivot point. You can use it, maybe that's at the top of your run if you're playing up. That kind of a thing. That's another very common thing in Hawaiian music, at least, is to play. You can play the chromatic note that is below whatever you need to play. If I need to play I can use the chromatic note to slide up to that. That kind of a Hawaiian sound would not at all be possible if you played all the right notes. You'd be stuck playing something like this. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when you can play it a little bit more interesting, terrible example, but that kind of idea, that's the magic. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have a lot of the genre. You wouldn't have a lot of the sound. You wouldn't have Uncle Led sounding like Uncle Led. You wouldn't have Peter Moon sounding like Peter Moon. It's all about the wrong notes. And they're not wrong. They're just a different color that you need to get comfortable using. And so practice moving between your whole steps like that and see what you can come up with. Explore. There is nothing written out that I know of that is going to teach you how to do this. You just need to try it out yourself in situations where it's musically acceptable, applicable, or not. Be blatantly wrong and blatantly inappropriate in a song by overdoing it. And then once you're comfortable overdoing it, you can always ratchet it back and make it more appropriate for the moment in the music. Anyways, I hope that's interesting. That is something that was really kind of a light bulb moment for me, is when I realized that the chromatic scale is what gives music its life. It's the interest. You're not going to be able to play outside of really square music if you don't venture into playing chromatically. So I encourage you to explore what you can, figure out what you can, and just put it on your plate of options. Put it in your library, because it's one of those things that, because it's not really taught, because no one really talks about it, you're going to have to kind of figure it out on your own. So if you commit a little bit of time to it and you know that it's an option, then you can actually improve at it. So hopefully this podcast was kind of the permission you needed to understand what it means to play wrong notes and get you to a point where you can set aside that time and go, okay, I'm just going to fiddle fart around, see what I can come up with. And that's really the best thing you can do to learn this style. I wish you all of the success as you explore. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast. If you like what you heard, please tell your ukulele group, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog. Any word of mouth really does help. And if you want to support the cause, please go over to liveukulele.com and click on store and check out some of my ukulele lessons and ebooks that I provide. There is really, over time, I've been writing these different ebooks and creating these courses, and it's finally starting to feel like there's almost something for everybody in there now. And so go check them out for what they teach. Usually it's kind of a unique view on the ukulele that you're not going to get elsewhere. I like to keep it really signature. I like to keep it really helpful and practical. I'm not interested in teaching you a bunch of just strumming patterns or just how to play a bunch of scales in a row. They have to have music to go with, and they have to have context to surround them with. And so that's the background that I teach from, especially with the left-hand technique for ukulele video course. That's sort of the flagship product at the moment. If you want a set of lessons that's really going to guide you from beginner to advanced and how to really ensure that you're playing with the best posture to create a solid foundation for yourself, so you're going to play easier and faster and not have to be as, fatigued and stressed and tight as you play, that is what's up. That's the thing to check out. So thanks for tuning in. The Live Ukulele podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. I kind of had a panic moment the other morning. I woke up, it's like, oh no, it's Saturday and I forgot to do a podcast. But that's okay because it was last Saturday and it was the second Saturday. So I hope you're well out there. All my best. Be good to one another. Take care. All of that good stuff. And keep playing music and find the inverse notes. Stop calling them wrong notes. Call them inverse notes. We'll start a trend. Aloha.